The late spring wind carried more dust than promise as Jesse Cole rode into Perdido. His weathered hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. The town sat like a forgotten prayer on the edge of the Llano Estacado, its adobe buildings bleached pale by years of unforgiving weather. Jesse's horse, a graying mare named Lark, picked her way carefully down the main street, her hooves raising small clouds in the bone-dried dirt. Jesse had been riding for 3 days straight from Las Cruces, and all he wanted was a meal that didn't come from his saddlebags, a drink that wasn't warm canteen water, and a place to rest before continuing west. Perdido wasn't his destination. Nowhere was, really. He was just another drifter in a territory full of them, carrying his past like a stone in his chest. The Blue Coyote Saloon squatted on the corner of Main and Segundo, its painted sign so faded that the coyote looked more like a sick dog. Jesse tied Lark to the hitching post, noting how her left foreleg trembled slightly. The old girl was getting worse. He'd need to check that shoe before they moved on come morning. Inside, the saloon was dim and marginally cooler than the street. A few locals nursed drinks at scattered tables, their conversations dying as Jesse entered. He was used to it. Strangers got that reaction in small towns, especially strangers who wore their guns like they knew how to use them. May Horner, the proprietress, stood behind the bar polishing glasses with mechanical precision. She was a handsome woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. "Whiskey," Jesse said, settling onto a stool. "And whatever's hot from the kitchen." "That be beans and cornbread," May replied, already pouring. "Meat's scarce since the drought started getting serious?" Jesse nodded, laying a silver dollar on the scarred wood. That's when he heard the raised voices from the back corner. "Now, Mrs. Quinn, you need to be reasonable about this." The speaker was a man in a too fine suit for Perdido, his voice carrying that particular brand of condescension that city folk reserved for anyone they considered beneath them. "The Central Pacific Railway Company is offering you a fair price for that patch of scrubland you call a ranch." "Fair." The woman's voice was steady but edged with steel. $50 for 40 acres with water rights. You must think I'm either desperate or stupid. Mr. Pike." Jesse glanced over. The woman, Mrs. Quinn, apparently sat straight-backed in her chair, hands folded on the table. She couldn't have been more than 26 or 27, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun and green eyes that sparked with controlled anger. Her dress was plain brown calico, mended but clean. A widow, Jesse guessed, from the black ribbon at her throat. Silas Pike leaned forward, his pomaded hair gleaming in the lamplight. 2 rough-looking men flanked him, hired muscle. Obviously. "The drought's getting worse. Ma'am, that creek of yours will be dry as dust by July. Take the money now, while the offer stands." "The agua seca has never run dry," Mrs. Quinn replied. "Not in my father's time, not in mine. Times change." Pike's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "The railway needs that water for the steam engines. One way or another. We'll get it. I'm trying to make this easy for you." One of Pike's men, a thick-necked brute with small eyes, leaned over and placed a meaty hand on Mrs. Quinn's shoulder. "The boss is being real generous, lady. You should listen." Jesse saw the woman's jaw tighten, saw her shift away from the unwanted touch. He should stay out of it. He'd learned long ago that getting involved in other people's troubles only led to more troubles of his own. But something about the way that hand lingered on her shoulder, possessive and threatening, made him set down his glass. "The lady seems to have made her position clear," Jesse said, his voice carrying across the room. "Might be time to move that hand." The saloon went quiet. Pike's man turned, his hand still on Mrs. Quinn's shoulder. "This ain't your concern. Saddle tramp." Jesse stood slowly, his hand resting casual-like on his gun belt. "Just hate to see a man forget his manners, especially around a lady." The thug's face reddened. He released Mrs. Quinn's shoulder and took a step toward Jesse. "You looking to get educated, cowboy?" "Already got all the education I need," Jesse replied mildly. "Question is whether you're smart enough to walk away." The man lunged, faster than Jesse expected, but Jesse had been in too many saloon brawls to be caught flat-footed. He sidestepped, grabbed the man's extended arm, and used his momentum to drive him face first into the bar. There was a crunch of cartilage as nose met wood, followed by a howl of pain. The second thug reached for his gun, but Jesse's Colt was already out and aimed at his chest. "I'd think real careful about that next move, friend." "Enough," Pike stood, his face flushed with anger. "Sheriff Dodd will hear about this assault." "Good," May Horner said from behind the bar, a shotgun now resting in her hands. "I'll be sure to tell Cyrus how your boys were manhandling Mrs. Quinn. I'm sure he'll be real interested, seeing as how he's supposed to keep the peace and all." Pike's eyes narrowed, calculating. After a moment, he gestured to his men. The one with the broken nose was helped to his feet, blood streaming through his fingers. "This isn't over, Mrs. Quinn. That land will be railway property before summer's end. You can take the money or watch it get taken legal-like. Your choice." He strode out, his men following. The saloon gradually returned to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones. "Thank you, Mrs. Quinn said, standing. "Though I could have handled it myself." "No doubt," Jesse replied, holstering his gun. "Just seemed like the odds were a bit uneven." She studied him for a moment, those green eyes sharp and assessing. "You're new in town?" "Just passing through," it was his standard answer, worn smooth by repetition. "Well, Mr. Cole, Jesse Cole." "Mr. Cole, I'm Nora Quinn. I owe you a debt." "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. Man should be able to eat his beans in peace without watching women get bothered." A slight smile touched her lips. "Nevertheless, if you need work, I could use an extra hand at my place. The pay's not much, but there's food and a place to sleep." Jesse shook his head. "Appreciate the offer, but like I said, I'm just passing through. Soon as my horse is rested, I'll be moving on." Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment, maybe, or resignation. "Of course. Good evening, Mr. Cole." She left, her boots clicking on the plank floor. Jesse returned to his meal, aware of May Horner's thoughtful gaze. "That was a fool thing to do," May said, refilling his glass. "Pike's got Sheriff Dodd in his pocket. You just made yourself a powerful enemy." "Won't matter come morning," Jesse replied. "I'll be long gone." May shook her head. "Men always think they can outrun their troubles. Nora's a good woman, trying to hold on to what's hers. Not many would stand up for her against Pike and his railway money." Jesse didn't answer. He'd stood up for plenty of people over the years. And where had it gotten him a scar across his ribs? Nightmares that woke him sweating. And the memory of Maria Santos crying over her daughter's grave, a child caught in crossfire during a range war Jesse had helped escalate. After finishing his meal, Jesse headed to the livery stable. The hostler, an old Mexican named Hector, examined Lark's leg with practiced hands. "Stone bruise," Hector pronounced. "Need rest. Senor, 3, maybe 4 days." Jesse cursed under his breath. 4 days in Perdido was 3.5 too many, but Lark had carried him faithfully for 5 years. He wouldn't repay that by pushing her when she was hurt. "All right, take good care of her." It was full dark when Jesse left the stable, instead of heading to the boarding house. He found himself walking the outskirts of town. The drought was bad, he could see that even by moonlight. The vegetation was sparse and brittle, the earth cracked like broken pottery. He came upon an old marker post near what must have been the Quinn property line. Curious, he struck a match. The post was weathered but solid, and near its base was a carved symbol, the eagle and snake of the Mexican Republic. "Damn," Jesse muttered. This was a Spanish land grant marker, probably from before the Mexican-American War. If the Quinn Ranch had legitimate claim dating back to the original Spanish grants, that changed everything. Those old grants often included extensive water rights. The match burned down to his fingers, and he dropped it, grinding it out with his boot. It wasn't his problem. He was just passing through. Yet, as he walked back to town, he couldn't shake the image of Nora Quinn facing down Pike and his men, her chin raised despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Foolish, maybe, but brave, the kind of bravery that got people killed in frontier towns. Sheriff Cyrus Dodd was waiting for him outside the boarding house, badge glinting in the lamplight. He was a big man, gone to fat, with the calculating eyes of a politician. "Hear you caused some trouble at the Blue Coyote," Dodd said, hand resting on his gun. "Prevented trouble, more like," Jesse replied evenly. "That's not how Mr. Pike tells it. Says you assaulted one of his associates without provocation." "Your Mr. Pike has an interesting definition of provocation." Dodd's eyes narrowed. "Pike's bringing progress to this territory. Railways mean prosperity, civilization. Smart folks recognize that and get out of the way. And those who don't, well," Dodd smiled unpleasantly. "The law has ways of dealing with troublemakers and squatters. You planning on staying in town long, Mr. Cole?" "Just until my horse is rested. See that you don't overstay your welcome. Perdido's a peaceful town. We aim to keep it that way." The threat was clear. Jesse nodded and entered the boarding house, but sleep was a long time coming. Through his window, he could see the stars, brilliant in the clear desert air. Somewhere out there, Nora Quinn was probably lying awake too, wondering how long she could hold out against the railway. Before dawn, Jesse rose and walked back to the Spanish marker. In the gray pre-dawn light, he could see more details. There were other markers too, forming a boundary. The Quinn Ranch was bigger than he'd thought, and if those water rights were legitimate. A sound made him turn. Young Miguel Chavez, who helped at the livery, was driving a small herd of goats along the creek bed. "Morning, senor." The boy called. "That's Mrs. Quinn's herd." "See, I take them to water before the sun gets bad." The boy's face was worried. "The creek, she gets lower every day. Soon, maybe no water for the goats." Jesse looked upstream. In the growing light, he could see fresh cuts in the earth, the beginning of what looked like a channel. His jaw tightened. Someone was already starting to divert the water. He should leave today, injured horse or not. This wasn't his fight. He'd learned the hard way that playing hero only led to graves sometimes your own, sometimes innocent folks who got caught in the middle. But as he stood there in the dawn light, watching that boy tend those scrawny goats with such care, Jesse felt the familiar tug of conscience. Nora Quinn was going to lose everything if she stood alone. Pike had the law, the money, and the men. All she had was a legitimate claim, and the courage to fight for it. "Damn it all to hell," Jesse muttered, knowing he was about to make another in a long line of decisions he'd probably regret. The sun broke the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Another scorching day in Perdido was beginning, and Jesse Cole, who was just passing through, found himself walking toward the Quinn Ranch instead of the road out of town. The morning sun was already brutal when Jesse reached the Quinn Ranch. The place was modest but well-kept, a single-story adobe house with a covered porch, a barn that had seen better days, and a corral where a few horses dozed in what little shade they could find. Goat pens stretched along the creek bank, and beyond them, scrubland dotted with mesquite and creosote bush. Nora Quinn emerged from the barn, carrying a bucket of grain. She stopped short when she saw him, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Cole, I thought you were leaving town." "My horse came up lame," Jesse said, dismounting. "Won't be traveling for a few days. Figured I might as well earn my keep somewhere." She studied him with those sharp green eyes, and Jesse had the uncomfortable feeling she could see right through his excuse. The offer still stands. $1 a day, meals, and you can sleep in the tack room. Fair enough. Can you fix fences? I've strung my share of wire. Good. The northwest section needs work. Goats have been getting through. She paused, then added, And Mr. Cole, I don't need a protector. I need a ranch hand. Are we clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. Jesse spent the morning working on the fence line, the sun climbing higher and meaner with each passing hour. The drought's effects were everywhere, grass withered to nothing, soil cracked and powdery, the few remaining plants gray with dust. He could see why Pike wanted this land. Even diminished, the agua seca was the only reliable water for miles. Around midday, when the heat became unbearable, Jesse heard horses approaching. He straightened, hand instinctively moving toward his gun, but relaxed when he saw it was Father Esteban from the Catholic church in town. The old priest rode with surprising grace for his age, accompanied by Miguel. Senor Cole. Father Esteban greeted him. I heard you had decided to stay for a time. Word travels fast. In Perdido, secrets are as rare as rain. The priest dismounted, producing a handkerchief to wipe his brow. I've come to speak with Senora Quinn about the markers. You know about those. Father Esteban's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. I know many things. My son, come, let us get out of this sun. They found Nora in the house, preparing a simple lunch. The interior was sparse but clean, with whitewashed walls and heavy wooden furniture that had probably come up from Mexico generations ago. A single photograph sat on the mantel, a younger Nora beside a tall man with kind eyes. Father, Nora said warmly, you'll stay for lunch. If it's no trouble. The priest settled himself at the table with obvious relief. I've been thinking about your situation with the railway. My child, those markers Jesse found there from the Terrazas grant. Nora's hand stilled on the bread she was slicing. My father always said we had papers somewhere, but after he died. The original grant documents would have been filed in Santa Fe when the territory changed hands. Father Esteban continued. But there might have been copies. Your father was a careful man. I've looked everywhere, Nora said, frustration creeping into her voice. The house, the barn, even the old root cellar. There's nothing. Perhaps you haven't looked in the right place. The priest accepted a glass of water gratefully. Your father came to confession regularly, not long before his death. He spoke of ensuring your inheritance was protected. He mentioned giving something to Father Miguel for safekeeping. Father Miguel died 3 years ago, Nora pointed out. Indeed, but church property is eternal. Whatever he was given would still be in the rectory somewhere. Jesse watched this exchange with interest. Seems like those papers would be mighty important right about now. They would prove the water rights predate any claim the railroad might make. Father Esteban explained. Spanish and Mexican grants are protected by treaty. Even the railroad would have to respect that. After lunch, they decided to search the rectory. The afternoon heat was oppressive as they rode into town. Jesse noticed how people watched them from doorways and windows, Nora Quinn riding with the priest and the stranger who'd bloodied Bart Hutchins's nose at the Blue Coyote. News of that would reach Pike before they even arrived at the church. The rectory was a small adobe building attached to the church, cluttered with decades of accumulated records, books, and religious artifacts. They spent hours searching, raising clouds of dust that made them all cough. This is hopeless, Nora said finally, sitting back on her heels. It could be anywhere. Or, Father Esteban said thoughtfully, it could be exactly where a careful priest would put something valuable. He moved to a wooden crucifix on the wall, running his fingers along its base. With a soft click, a hidden compartment opened. Inside was an oilskin packet, yellow with age. Nora's hands shook slightly as she unwrapped it. The documents were in Spanish, but the official seals were unmistakable. This is it, she breathed. The original grant, Look, it specifically mentions water rights to the Agua Seca and all its tributaries. More than that. Father Esteban pointed to a passage. It grants rights to any water flowing underground through the property. Your father knew the old laws well. Jesse examined the papers. These need to be properly translated and filed with the territorial authorities. Pike won't give up just because you wave these at him. Then I'll take them to Santa Fe myself, Nora said firmly. That's a 3-day ride through rough country. Jesse warned. Pike won't let you go alone. Then I won't go alone. She looked at him steadily. That is, if you're willing. Before Jesse could answer, they heard shouting from outside. Through the window, they could see smoke rising from the direction of the Quinn ranch. No, Nora gasped, already running for her horse. They rode hard. Jesse's injured Lark protesting but keeping pace. As they crested the last rise, Jesse's heart sank. The barn was fully engulfed. Flames reaching toward the cloudless sky. The goat pens were broken open, the animals scattered. Nora leapt from her horse before it had fully stopped, running toward the inferno. Jesse caught her arm, pulling her back. It's too late. The feed, she cried, struggling against his grip. All our winter feed is in there. Without feed, the goats would starve before spring. Jesse understood the calculation no goats meant no income, which meant Nora couldn't pay taxes or fight legal battles. Pike was playing for keeps. Miguel appeared from behind the house, his face streaked with soot and tears. Senora, I tried to stop them. 3 men with torches. They said to tell you this was just the beginning. Jesse released Nora and ran to the water pump, but the handle moved too easily. Someone had damaged the mechanism. The creek was too far to form a bucket brigade. All they could do was watch the barn collapse in a shower of sparks. Sheriff Dodd arrived as the last flames were dying, his timing too convenient to be coincidental. He surveyed the damage with theatrical concern. Terrible accident, he pronounced. These old barns, dry as tinder, one spark from a lantern. This was no accident, Nora said coldly. Miguel saw the men who did it. Dodd turned to the boy, his expression hardening. That's so, son. You're sure you saw right? Sometimes smoke and fear can make a person see things that aren't there. Miguel looked from Dodd's hard face to Nora's encouraging one, then dropped his eyes. Maybe I was confused. Senor. There you have it, Dodd said with satisfaction. Unfortunate accident, though I have to wonder. Mrs. Quinn, if you set this fire yourself for the insurance money, times being hard and all. There is no insurance, Nora said through gritted teeth. No, well then, that is unfortunate. Course, Mr. Pike's offer still stands. Might be you should reconsider before any more accidents happen. Jesse stepped forward. That sounds like a threat, Sheriff. Dodd's hand dropped to his gun. You calling me a liar, drifter, because that would be a serious accusation. Might even be enough to warrant arrest. The moment stretched taut. Jesse could feel Nora tense beside him, could see Father Esteban praying silently. His own hand itched to go for iron, but that's what Dodd wanted, an excuse to remove him from the board. I'm just observing that your timing is remarkable, Jesse said mildly. Must be that lawman's instinct. Dodd's face reddened, but before he could respond, Father Esteban intervened. Sheriff, surely you'll want to investigate this properly. The church takes attacks on its parishioners very seriously. I'm sure the bishop would be interested to hear about violence against a widow. It was a good bluff. The Catholic Church still carried weight in the territory, especially among the Mexican population that made up half the voters. Dodd backed down, but his eyes promised retribution. I'll look into it, he said grudgingly. Meanwhile, I'd advise everyone to be more careful. Lot of accidents happening lately. After Dodd left, they assessed the damage. The barn was a total loss, along with all the stored feed and most of Nora's tools. The goats were slowly rounded up, but without shelter or food. Keeping them alive would be nearly impossible. "I can't pay you," Nora said quietly to Jesse as they stood watching the last embers. "I'll understand if you need to move on." Jesse was quiet for a long moment. The smart play was to leave now, tonight, before Pike escalated further. But he kept thinking about those documents hidden in Nora's house, about the legal claim she had that Pike was so desperate to destroy, and about the woman herself, standing straight despite the blow she'd taken, already planning how to rebuild. "Seems to me," he said finally, "that barn fell down on my watch. Only right I helped put it back up." She turned to look at him, and he saw something flicker in her eyes, surprise, gratitude, and something else he didn't want to name. That night, Jesse slept in what was left of the tack room, his gun close at hand, through the broken slats. He could see Nora's window, the lamp burning late as she worked on translating the grant documents. He'd known her less than 2 days, but already he was making the kind of choices that had gotten him in trouble before. The difference was, this time he could see the trap closing. Pike and Dodd wouldn't stop with the barn. They'd push and push until someone broke or someone died. The sensible thing was to get Nora to Santa Fe, file those papers, and get out before the real violence started. But Jesse had never been accused of being sensible. Just before dawn, he heard horses approaching slowly, trying to be quiet. Jesse rolled out of his blankets, checked his Colt, and slipped outside. 3 riders were approaching the goat pens, probably planning to scatter the herd again or worse. Jesse fired a shot into the air. "That's far enough, boys!" The riders wheeled their horses, and gunfire erupted. Jesse dove behind a water trough as bullets whined overhead. He counted muzzle flashes, 3 shooters, spread out to make harder targets. A rifle cracked from the house. Nora, shooting from her window. One of the riders yelped and clutched his shoulder. Jesse used the distraction to put a bullet close enough to another rider's ear to make him think twice. "Pull back!" one of them shouted, and they spurred their horses into the darkness. Jesse waited, listening, but they were gone. Nora emerged from the house, rifle in hand, wearing a nightgown with a shawl thrown over it. Her hair was loose, catching the first light of dawn. "You hit one," Jesse observed. "Winged him," she corrected. "I was aiming for his horse. Didn't want to kill an animal for its rider's stupidity." Jesse couldn't help but smile. Most folks would have aimed for the man. "I'm not most folks, Mr. Cole." She looked at him steadily. "Neither are you. I think most drifters would have been 3 towns away by now." "Yeah, well," Jesse holstered his gun, suddenly aware of how she looked in the growing light. "Maybe my horse is more lame than I thought." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Maybe so. Coffee." As they walked toward the house, Jesse noticed movement on the horizon, more riders, coming fast, but these wore badges that caught the morning sun. "Looks like the sheriff's coming to arrest me for disturbing the peace," Jesse said dryly. "Let him come," Nora said, and there was steel in her voice. "I've got coffee on and documents to translate. Mister, Pike wants a fight. He'll get one." Jesse followed her inside, knowing he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. The coffee was strong and bitter. The morning was already hot, and trouble was riding in with the law behind it. Just another day in Perdido, where nothing was ever as simple as just passing through. Sheriff Dodd's visit was brief and predictable. He arrested Jesse for disturbing the peace and reckless discharge of firearms within town limits. Never mind that the Quinn Ranch was well outside those limits. Jesse went quietly, giving Nora a meaningful look as they cuffed him. "Don't worry about Mr. B. Cole," Dodd told Nora with false sympathy. "He'll get a fair trial. Judge Morrison comes through next week. Course, if those barn burners come back while he's locked up." The threat hung in the air like smoke from yesterday's fire. In the Perdido jail, Jesse found himself sharing a cell with a drunk cowhand who snored louder than a rusty gate. The building was solid adobe with barred windows. Breaking out would take more than muscle. He settled in to wait, knowing Nora wouldn't let him rot there. Outside, Nora stood on the jail's wooden sidewalk, her mind racing. She needed Jesse free, but more importantly, she needed to know what Pike was really planning. The barn burning and night raids were just harassment. Something bigger was coming. Senora Quinn. She turned to find Miguel at her elbow, his young face serious. "What is it?" "My cousin Roberto works on the road crew north of town. He says they're building something strange up Skeleton Canyon. Lots of timber and cement going up there." Nora's pulse quickened. Skeleton Canyon was upstream from her property, where the Agua Seca emerged from the hills. "Can you show me?" "Sí, but it's dangerous. They have guards." "Then we'll be careful." They left immediately, taking the long way around through the mesas to avoid being seen. The sun climbed higher, turning the landscape into a shimmering furnace. Nora's horse picked its way carefully through the loose shale, while Miguel rode his sure-footed burro. As they approached the canyon mouth, Miguel held up a hand. "There, Senora. You see." Through her father's old field glasses, Nora could make out the construction. Her heart sank. Pike wasn't just planning to divert water, he was building a dam. A proper concrete dam that would trap the Agua Seca's flow, leaving her land dry as bone. "The railway needs water for the engines," she murmured, understanding flooding through her. "But also for the towns that'll spring up along the line. Control the water." "Control everything," Miguel finished. They watched workers hauling materials up the canyon. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. This was no small operation. Pike had invested serious money here. A shout made them duck. A rider was heading their way, rifle already out. Nora grabbed Miguel's reins. "Ride back to town." They fled through the arroyos, horses sliding and scrambling. Gunshots cracked behind them, bullets singing off rocks. Nora's mare stumbled, nearly throwing her, but she held on. More riders appeared on their flank. They were being herded. "This way." Miguel yanked his burro sharp left into a narrow defile. Nora followed, branches tearing at her skirts. Behind them, curses and the sound of larger horses struggling to follow. They burst out onto the main road just as a freight wagon appeared around the bend. The pursuing riders pulled up sharp, unwilling to continue the chase with witnesses. "That was too close," Nora panted. "But now you know," Miguel said with grim satisfaction. "Now you can fight them." Back in town, Nora went straight to May Horner at the Blue Coyote. The older woman listened to her story with narrowed eyes. "A dam," May said finally. "The bastard's building a dam. That changes everything." "I need Jesse out of jail," Nora said. "Tonight." May was quiet for a long moment. 20 years ago, your mother helped me when no one else would. Gave me a loan to buy this place when the bank laughed in my face." She reached under the bar, producing an iron key. "Dodd keeps a spare hidden in his office. Fool thinks I don't know where." "May, if they catch you, then I'll say you stole it. Now listen close. Dodd plays poker here every Tuesday night, drinks too much and stays late. That gives you maybe 4 hours." That night, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, the first in months. The air felt electric, charged with potential. Nora waited until full dark, then slipped through Perdido's back alleys. The jail was quiet. The deputy on duty reading a dime novel by lamplight. She threw a pebble at the side window, then another. The deputy grumbled, "Coming to investigate." When he stuck his head out, Nora brought a sock full of flour down hard. He dropped without a sound. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Jesse looked up from his bunk, instantly alert. "Evening, ma'am. Come to break me out." "Come to return stolen property to its rightful owner," she corrected, already working on his cell door. "You belong to me for another 3 days' work. Remember?" They dragged the unconscious deputy inside and locked him in Jesse's cell. The drunk cowhand never stirred. Outside, The first fat raindrops began to fall. "We need to get to the canyon," Nora explained as they retrieved their horses from behind the smithy where Miguel had hidden them. "Pike's building a dam. If that storm fills the reservoir before we can prove ownership." Jesse understood immediately. Once Pike controlled the water, possession would be 9/10 of the law. They rode hard through the increasing rain. The night split by lightning that turned the desert momentarily bright as day. The canyon was a different world in the storm. Water rushed down every gully, turning the construction site into a muddy mess. The guards had taken shelter, leaving the dam unfinished but functional enough to catch runoff. "There," Jesse pointed. "The sluice gates. If we can open those—" They dismounted, struggling through knee-deep water that hadn't been there an hour ago. The wooden gates were secured with chains and a massive padlock. "Stand back," Jesse said, drawing his gun. "No," Nora caught his arm. "They'll hear. Look, the cement on these posts is still wet. We can—" A shout cut her off. 3 riders appeared through the rain, Red Malloy and 2 others, all armed. The big gunman's reputation was known throughout the territory, fast, accurate, and utterly without mercy. "Well, well," Malloy called out, water streaming from his hat brim. "The jailbird and the widow. Mister, Pike's gonna be real happy I found you here." Jesse stepped forward, hand near his gun. "Let the lady go, Malloy. This is between Pike and me now." "Don't think so." Malloy's teeth showed white in a lightning flash. "Got orders. The woman's land papers need to disappear, and accidents happen in flash floods. Tragic. Really." The sluice gate groaned behind them. The water was rising fast, pressing against the weak points in the construction. If those gates gave way suddenly— "Jesse," Nora said quietly, "the left post." He saw it too. The cement foundation was crumbling under the water's assault. All it needed was a little help. Malloy was still talking, enjoying himself. "Course, we could make a deal. The widow signs over her land nice and legal-like, and maybe you both walk away." "I've got a better deal," Jesse said, and dove left as he drew. Gunfire erupted. Jesse's shot caught one rider in the shoulder, spinning him from the saddle. Nora threw herself against the weakened post. Using her full weight, Malloy's gun swung toward her. "No!" Jesse fired again, forcing Malloy to dodge. The other rider shot wild, bullets spanging off rocks. The post cracked. Water began spurting through. Nora pushed harder, and Jesse added his shoulder to hers. Behind them, the mass of storm water pressed relentlessly. "It's giving!" Nora shouted. The post shattered. Water exploded through the gap, catching the sluice gate and ripping it free. The sudden torrent swept one of Malloy's horses off its feet. The gunman himself barely managed to spur his mount to higher ground. "This ain't over," Malloy roared over the water's thunder, but he was already retreating with his remaining man. Jesse grabbed Nora, pulling her up the canyon wall as water surged past where they'd been standing. They climbed frantically, the flood rising behind them. Nora's horse screamed, swimming hard for shore. Jesse's mount was already on high ground, calling anxiously. They made it to safety just as the partially built dam gave way entirely. Months of engineering work vanished in minutes, swept downstream by nature's fury. Soaked and shaking, they watched the destruction. "Pike's going to blame us," Nora said. "Let him try. That dam was illegal. No permits, no water rights. He can't admit it existed without admitting his crime." Lightning illuminated her face. "You knew that when we came up here." "Suspected it. Man like Pike cuts corners when he thinks no one's watching." They caught their horses and rode back through the storm. The rain was already slackening, but it had done its work. The Agua Seca would run full for days, maybe weeks. As they approached town, they saw lights blazing at the jail. Dodd was there with 12 men, organizing a manhunt. "We can't go back," Jesse said. "Not yet." "Father Esteban's church," Nora suggested. "Sanctuary." They circled wide, entering the church through the vestry. Father Esteban was waiting, unsurprised. "I heard the shooting," he said calmly, "and saw the flood. God works in mysterious ways." "Mysterious and wet," Jesse muttered, wringing out his hat. "You'll be safe here tonight. Sheriff Dodd won't violate sanctuary, not with the Mexican families watching. But tomorrow we file those land grant papers," Nora said firmly. "I'm done playing defense." Jesse looked at her soaked, muddy, magnificent in her determination. "You know Pike won't quit. Men like him never do until someone stops them permanent." "Then we stop him." She met his eyes steadily. "Together." Father Esteban cleared his throat. "Perhaps dry clothes first, and I believe May Horner sent some food." As they changed into borrowed clothes and ate May's stew, the storm passed entirely. Stars emerged, brilliant after the rain. The desert would bloom briefly, then return to its patient waiting. "I owe you," Nora said quietly while Father Esteban prepared beds in the adjoining room. "No debts between partners," Jesse replied. She studied him. "Is that what we are, partners?" Before he could answer, shouts erupted outside. Through the window, they could see riders with torches surrounding the church. Dodd's voice boomed, "Cole misses! Quinn, come out now and nobody gets hurt." Father Esteban stepped onto the church steps. "This is God's house. Sheriff, you have no authority here." "My authority comes from the law, and mine from a higher power. Would you violate sanctuary?" The crowd behind Dodd muttered uneasily. Many were Catholic, and even those who weren't respected the old traditions. Malloy pushed forward, his arm in a sling from the night's shooting. "To hell with sanctuary. They destroyed railway property, caused a flood that could have killed dozens." "What property?" Father Esteban asked mildly. "I know of no railway construction in Skeleton Canyon. Do you, Sheriff?" Dodd's face was livid in the torchlight. He knew he was trapped. Admitting to the illegal dam would open Pike to lawsuits from every downstream rancher. "This isn't over," Dodd snarled finally. "They can't hide in there forever." "No," Father Esteban agreed. "But they can stay until Judge Morrison arrives. I'm sure he'll be very interested in tonight's events." The crowd gradually dispersed, leaving only a few deputies on watch. Inside, Jesse and Nora sat in a pew, finally allowing exhaustion to set in. 4 days until the judge," Nora said. "Think we can last?" Jesse looked at her profile in the candlelight. "We've made it this far." She turned to him. "Why did you stay, really?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I'm tired of passing through. Maybe I figure it's time to stop running from other folks' fights and pick one of my own." "And you picked mine?" "Seems like I did." Something shifted between them in that quiet moment. The church was peaceful around them, a sanctuary in more ways than one. Outside, their enemies waited and planned, but for now, they were safe, and they were together. "Partners," Nora said softly, offering her hand. Jesse took it, her fingers still cold from the rain. "Partners." Thunder rumbled distantly, the storm moving east. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had won a victory. The water flowed free. The truth was exposed, and two people who'd been alone had found something worth fighting for together. In the morning, they would plan their next move, but for now, they sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, while candles flickered and Father Esteban's prayers echoed softly in the sanctuary. The storm had washed the air clean, leaving behind the sweet smell of wet sage and creosote. Dawn broke gentle over Perdido, painting the church walls rose gold as Jesse stood on the back porch, checking his colt for the 10th time since waking. 3 days they'd held up in sanctuary, and the strain was showing. Dodd's men still circled like buzzards, waiting. Inside, Nora sat at Father Esteban's desk, translating the last of the land grant documents. Her hair caught the morning light through the window, And Jesse found himself watching her work, noting the determined set of her jaw, the careful precision of her pen strokes. "You keep staring like that, Mr. Cole. People might talk," she said without looking up. "People are already talking." "True enough." She set down her pen, rubbing her tired eyes. "I've been thinking, Pike won't wait for the judge. He's lost too much face with that dam washing out." Jesse moved to the window, scanning the street. "He'll make his move today. Has to. Then we should leave. Ride for Santa Fe now. File the papers ourselves." "That's what he expects. What he's counting on." Jesse turned to face her. "No. We make our stand here. Force him to show his hand where folks can see." Nora stood, crossing to where he stood. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of fighting alone for so long. "Jesse, I need to tell you something. Before whatever comes next." "Nora!" "No, let me say this." She took a breath. "When my husband died, I thought I'd never... I built walls. Kept everyone at arm's length. It was safer that way. Then you rode into town, and I watched you stand up for me when you had no cause to, and I thought..." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I thought maybe I was tired of being safe." Jesse felt his chest tighten. "I'm no good for you. I've got a past that..." "We've all got pasts." She stepped closer. "What matters is what we choose now." He wanted to tell her about Santa Rosa, about the family caught in crossfire because he'd tracked outlaws too close to town, about waking up at night still hearing Maria Santos's screams. But looking into Nora's green eyes, he saw something that made the words stick in his throat, not judgment, but understanding. "I'm trouble," he said finally. "Always have been. Good thing I'm not looking for easy." The space between them had shrunk to nothing. Jesse could feel the warmth of her, could see the pulse at her throat. He lifted a hand to her face, thumb brushing her cheek, and she leaned into the touch. "This is a bad idea," he murmured. "The worst," she agreed. And then her hand was on his chest, right over his heart. The world seemed to stop. Jesse knew he should step back, saddle up, ride out before things got more complicated. That was his way. Keep moving, stay free. Don't let anyone get close enough to be hurt when things went bad. But her palm was warm through his shirt, and he could feel his heartbeat against her hand, quick and hard. Her eyes held his, green as spring grass after rain. "You stay," she said, soft but certain. Not a question, not quite a command. A choice offered. A door opened. Jesse covered her hand with his, pressing it tighter to his chest. "Nora." "You stay," she repeated, stronger now. "Not because you have to, not because of Pike or the ranch or any debt you think you owe. You stay because this, right here, is where you choose to be." The words broke something loose in Jesse's chest, some barrier he'd built brick by careful brick over years of drifting. He'd been running so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to want to stop. "I'm not a settling down kind of man," he said, but even he could hear the lie in it. I'm not asking you to be a different man. I'm asking you to be the man you already are, just here, with me." Her fingers curled into his shirt. "We'll fight Pike together, build something together, equal partners. Remember?" Jesse looked at her, really looked, not the vulnerable widow he'd thought he was protecting, but a woman who'd faced down gunmen and floods and still stood unbowed, strong enough to fight beside, not behind, strong enough maybe to accept what he carried without being crushed by it. "I was part of a range war in Lincoln County," he said suddenly, the words spilling out. "Hired gun for the big ranchers. There was a family, the Santos family. They got caught in a fight that wasn't theirs. Their youngest was 12, same age as Miguel." Nora's hand didn't move from his chest. "What happened?" "She died. Stray bullet in a running fight. My bullet. Maybe. Or maybe one of the men I was tracking. Doesn't matter. I led that fight to their doorstep." He waited for her to pull away, to see disgust in her eyes. Instead, she brought her other hand up to his face. And you've been running from it ever since. Wouldn't you? Maybe, for a while? Her thumb traced his jaw. But Jesse, you can't outrun a ghost. You can only choose to do better, be better. Isn't that what you've been doing here, standing for something instead of just passing through? He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. I don't know if I can be the man you need. I don't need you to be anything but what you are. A good man who's made mistakes and is trying to make amends. She smiled slightly. Besides, I'm not exactly simple myself. I've got thorns. Jesse Cole, ask anyone in town. I've noticed, he said dryly, which made her laugh a sound like water in the desert. So, she looked up at him, vulnerable and fierce all at once. Do you stay? Jesse thought about all the towns he'd passed through, all the people he'd kept at arm's length, all the nights under stars with only Lark for company. That had been freedom, of a sort, but standing here with Nora's hand on his heart, he realized there were different kinds of freedom. The freedom to stop running, to choose a place and person to stand with. I stay, he said quietly. Something shifted in her eyes. Relief, joy, and deeper things he wasn't ready to name. She rose up on her toes, and he bent his head, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper as years of loneliness dissolved between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Nora rested her forehead against his. That was probably bad timing. Terrible timing, he agreed, but he was smiling. A throat cleared behind them. Father Esteban stood in the doorway, looking amused and slightly embarrassed. Forgive the interruption, but we have visitors. Through the window, they could see May Horner approaching with Judge Morrison a day early and looking travel-worn but official. Bless that woman, Nora breathed. She must have sent riders to intercept him. They straightened their clothes and tried to look like they hadn't just been changing the course of their lives. Judge Morrison was a stern man with intelligent eyes that missed nothing, including the high color in Nora's cheeks and Jesse's protective stance. Mrs. Quinn, Mr. Cole, I understand there's been some excitement in Perdido. Perhaps you'd better tell me everything. For the next hour, they laid out the whole story, the illegal dam, the harassment, the burnt barn, the attempt on their lives. Father Esteban produced the land grant documents, which the judge examined carefully. These appear to be in order, Morrison said finally. The water rights clearly belong to the Quinn Ranch. Any attempt to divert that water would be theft. But, Your Honor, Sheriff Dodd had appeared, Pike at his shoulder, both looking thunderous. These two destroyed railway property, caused a flood. What property? Judge Morrison asked mildly. I've seen no permits for railway construction in Skeleton Canyon. Surely the Central Pacific isn't building illegal dams on territorial land. Pike's face went red, then white. There's been a misunderstanding. Indeed, Mr. Pike, you're under arrest for attempted theft of water rights, destruction of private property, and conspiracy to defraud. Sheriff, do your duty. Dodd looked like he'd swallowed a rattlesnake. Now, Judge, surely we can... Sheriff Dodd, you're relieved of duty pending investigation of corruption charges. Deputy Harlan, you're acting sheriff now. The young deputy looked stunned, but stepped forward. Yes, Your Honor. What followed was swift. Pike blustered and threatened, but the judge was unmoved. Within an hour, Pike was in the same cell Jesse had occupied, and Dodd had slunk out of town on urgent business. As the sun set, Jesse and Nora finally returned to her ranch. The place looked different somehow, still rough, still struggling, but full of possibility now. They stood on the porch, watching the last light fade. The evening was soft, stars just beginning to show. Inside, a lamp glowed warmly, and Jesse could smell coffee brewing May had been by. leaving supplies and a note that made Nora blush. "So," Nora said finally, "you stayed." "Seems I did." "What happens now?" Jessie turned to her, seeing the uncertainty beneath her courage. "Now we rebuild that barn. Dig some new wells. Maybe expand the goat herd. Fight off the next pike who comes along, because there's always a next one." "Together." He pulled her close, feeling her fit against him like she'd always belonged there. Together. She lifted her face to his, and this kiss was different, slower, deeper, full of promise. When they finally went inside, leaving the door open to the cooling night air, it was as partners in every sense. Later, much later, as they sat by the fire with coffee and plans for the future, Nora placed her hand on his chest again, feeling his steady heartbeat. "No regrets?" she asked softly. Jessie covered her hand with his, remembering all the miles he'd traveled to reach this moment. Not a one. Outside, a coyote called across the desert, and another answered. The sound was lonely and wild, but inside the small adobe house, two people who'd been alone had found their way to each other. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. There was still Malloy to deal with, and the ranch needed everything, but tonight was theirs. "I love you," Nora said quietly, the words hanging in the air like a gift. Jessie pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. He'd never said the words to anyone, had thought himself incapable, but here, now, they came as natural as breathing. "I love you too," he said, and meant it down to his bones. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing on the walls. Somewhere in the distance, the agua seca flowed free and strong, fed by the storm, and in a small ranch house on the edge of nowhere, two hearts beat as one, having chosen each other against all odds and good sense. Jessie Cole had finally stopped passing through. He was home. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch as Jessie saddled the horses. 3 days had passed since Judge Morrison's ruling, but Jessie knew their troubles weren't over. Men like Pike had long memories and longer reaches. "You sure about this?" Jessie asked as Nora emerged from the house, dressed for hard riding in a split skirt and boots. "Father Esteban remembered something," she said, checking her rifle. "My father made another trip to Santa Fe just before he died. If there are more documents, then we'd better find them before Pike's lawyers do." Jessie swung into the saddle. "Miguel, you keep watch here. Anyone comes sniffing around." "I fire the warning shot and ride for town." The boy finished. Senor Jessie, you can trust me." They rode out as the day heated up, taking the old Spanish road that wound through the mesas. Jessie kept scanning the horizon. Old habits die hard. Beside him, Nora rode with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. "Tell me about your father," Jessie said as they watered the horses at a hidden spring. Nora's face softened. "James Quinn. Came west from Missouri after the war. Married my mother against everyone's advice. She was Mexican, daughter of the original grant holders. People said he married her for the land, but—" She smiled. "You should have seen them together, like two halves of the same soul. He taught you to shoot, and read law books. Said a woman alone needed both skills out here." Her expression darkened. He was right. They were halfway to Santa Fe when Jessie spotted the dust cloud. "Riders coming fast. 5, maybe 6. Nora was already spurring her horse toward a cluster of rocks. They made it to cover just as the riders crested the hill. Red Malloy led them, his arm still in a sling but his gun hand free. "Damn," Jessie muttered. "How'd he know?" "Dodd," Nora said grimly. "He might have left town, but he still has friends." The riders had stopped, studying the ground. A tracker was with them. Reading the signs, it wouldn't take long. "Can't fight them all," Jessie said. "Not in the open." "The Box Canyon?" Nora whispered. "Half a mile west. If we can reach it—" They slipped away, keeping the rocks between them and Malloy's bunch. But the tracker was good. Shouts behind them said they'd been spotted. The chase was on. Jesse and Nora rode hard, their horses' hooves thundering across the hardpan. Bullets whined past, kicking up dust. The canyon mouth appeared ahead narrow, winding, full of places for ambush. They plunged in, Jesse pulling up sharp around the first bend. "Keep going, find cover." He dropped from Lark, rifle in hand. When the first rider came around the bend at full gallop, Jesse's shot took his horse's bridle, sending animal and rider tumbling. The man scrambled for cover as his companions pulled up short. "That's far enough. Malloy," Jesse called out. "You're outnumbered. Cole, give us the woman and you can ride away." "Interesting offer." Jesse fired again, keeping their heads down. "Here's mine. You turn around now, and I won't put the next one through your good arm." Gunfire erupted. Jesse hunkered down as bullets spanged off the rocks. He could hear Nora's rifle cracking from further up the canyon. Smart woman. She'd found high ground. The fight was fierce but brief. Canyon walls made every shot echo like thunder. One of Malloy's men tried to flank Jesse and caught a bullet in the thigh from Nora's position. Another's horse went down, trapping its rider's leg. "Pull back," Malloy roared. "This ain't worth dying for." As quick as it started, it was over. Jesse waited until the hoofbeats faded before climbing to where Nora waited. "You hit?" he asked. "Scratched." She showed him a graze on her arm, bleeding but not serious. "You—" "I'll live." He was already tearing his shirt for a bandage. "They'll be back with more men." "Then we'd better hurry." They rode through the night, pushing hard. Santa Fe appeared with the dawn, its adobe walls glowing pink in the early light. The territorial capital was bustling even at this early hour. Freight wagons, cavalry patrols, merchants opening their shops. The records office was in the old Spanish governor's palace. The clerk, a thin man named Josephson, recognized Nora immediately. "Mrs. Quinn, your father, God rest him, was here not 2 weeks before he passed." "What did he file?" Nora asked urgently. Josephson consulted his ledgers. "Ah, yes. He registered an addition to the original grant, a codicil from 1821 when Mexico gained independence. It extends the water rights to include all underground sources accessible from the property." Jesse whistled low. "That's ironclad. No wonder Pike wanted you gone before anyone found this." "There's more," Josephson continued. He also filed a survey map showing mineral deposit silver, possibly copper. Said he wanted it all documented proper before— He paused delicately. "Before he died," Nora finished. "He knew he was sick." "Can we get certified copies?" Jesse asked. "Of course, though it will take some time, Mom." "We'll wait," Nora said firmly. They spent the day in Santa Fe, Jesse keeping watch while Nora handled the legal matters. He couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Sure enough, as they left the telegraph office where Nora had wired the news to Judge Morrison, Jesse spotted a familiar figure. "Dodd," he said quietly, across the plaza. The ex-sheriff wasn't alone. 2 hard cases flanked him, and Jesse recognized one from the dam fight. "Back door," Nora said. They slipped through the afternoon crowd, ducking into an alley, but Dodd had anticipated them. He stood at the alley's end, gun drawn. "Should have minded your own business, Cole," Dodd said. "Now Pike's got to clean up all loose ends." "Including you?" Jesse asked. "You think he'll let you live, knowing what you know?" Doubt flickered in Dodd's eyes. "Shut up!" "He's right," Nora said. "You're as much a liability as we are now. Pike doesn't leave witnesses." "I said shut." The shot came from behind Dodd. He staggered, looking surprised, then fell. One of Pike's men stood there, smoking gun in hand. "Sst! Mister, Pike sends his regards," the gunman said, turning the weapon on them. Jesse was faster. His shot caught the man's center mass, dropping him, The second thug fled, wanting no part of a real gunfight. "We need to go," Jesse said, pulling Nora away from the scene. "Now!" They retrieved their horses and rode hard for Perdido. The documents were safe in Nora's saddlebags, but Jesse knew this had escalated beyond legal battles. Pike was cleaning house, eliminating everyone who could testify against him. "He'll come for us," Nora said as they camped that night in a hidden arroyo. "All of us. May, Father Esteban, anyone who helped." Jesse stared into the small fire. "Then we end it first." "How he's in jail. For now. But men like Pike buy their way out, or have judges killed." He met her eyes across the flames. "Sometimes the law isn't enough." "Jesse Cole," Nora said firmly. "We're not killers." "No," he agreed. "But we're not victims either." They reached Perdido the next afternoon to find the town in uproar. Pike had indeed been released. A lawyer from Kansas City had arrived with a federal writ claiming jurisdiction. He was holed up in the railway hotel with a dozen gunmen. "It's a siege," May told them at the Blue Coyote. "Nobody goes near the hotel. They say Pike's waiting for more men from Denver." "Where's Morrison?" Jesse asked. "Left this morning for Silver City. Convenient timing." May's expression was grim. "We're on our own." That night, Jesse stood on the Quinn Ranch porch, watching the stars. Nora joined him, slipping her hand into his. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said, the law not being enough." "Forget it. You were right." "No, listen." She turned to face him. "My father used to say that law was what separated us from animals, but he also said that when law fails, good people have to stand up, not for vengeance, but for justice." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we give Pike one chance to leave peacefully. If he refuses..." She squared her shoulders. "Then we protect our town, our home, together." Jesse pulled her close, marveling at her strength. "You sure?" "I'm sure." She looked up at him. "But we do it smart, and we do it so that when it's over, we can live with ourselves." "All right," Jesse said. "Here's what we do." The next morning, Father Esteban delivered their message to the hotel. Come noon, Pike could meet them at the old mission outside town. Come alone, bring the papers dropping all claims to the water rights. And he could leave Perdido alive. Refuse, and they'd file charges in federal court with enough evidence to hang him. "Think he'll come?" Nora asked as they waited at the mission. "He'll come," Jesse said. "Pride won't let him run." Sure enough, as the sun reached its zenith, Pike appeared. But not alone, Malloy and 4 others flanked him. "Should have known you'd break your word." Jesse called out, "Business, Cole." Pike replied, "Just business. Here's my counteroffer. You and the widow sign over everything: land, water, mineral rights. Then you disappear. Otherwise..." He shrugged. "Otherwise you'll kill us like you killed Dodd." Pike's smile was cold. "Dodd was weak, bad for business. And us. You're an annoyance, but I'm a reasonable man. Sign and live." Nora stepped forward. "I'll sign nothing. That land was my mother's, my grandmother's, back when your railroad was just a dream. You want it, come and take it." Pike's face darkened. "So be it. Malloy." The gunman stepped forward, but Jesse was ready. "One thing first. Pike, you might want to look behind you." Pike laughed. Oldest trick in the sound of 50 rifles being cocked cut him off. All along the mission walls, the townspeople of Perdido stood with weapons aimed. May Horner, Miguel, even mild-mannered Josephson from the bank. "You threatened our town." Father Esteban called down, "Our families. Did you think we would not stand together?" Pike's men looked nervous now, calculating odds. Malloy's hand hovered near his gun, but even he wasn't fool enough to draw against those numbers. "This isn't over." Pike snarled. "Yes," Judge Morrison said. stepping from the mission doorway. "It is. Federal marshals arrested your Kansas City lawyer this morning. Amazing what he confessed to save his own neck." The judge smiled coldly. "You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and about a dozen other charges. Your railway bosses have disavowed all knowledge of your activities. You're alone. Pike." The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Pike's hired guns scattered like quail, wanting no part of federal charges. Malloy tried to run but tripped over Miguel's strategically placed foot and was quickly subdued. As the marshals led Pike away, he turned back to Jesse and Nora. "You think you've won, the railroad will keep coming. If not me, someone else." "Maybe," Nora said calmly. "But they'll find this town ready and united." That evening, Perdido celebrated. The Blue Coyote had never seen such a crowd. Jesse stood apart, watching Nora accept congratulations, seeing how the townspeople looked at her with new respect. "Not much for celebrations?" May asked, joining him. "Just thinking," Jesse said. "She could have sold out, taken Pike's money, started over somewhere safe." "But she didn't, because of you." Jesse shook his head. "No, she'd have fought with or without me. He paused. "I just made sure she didn't have to fight alone." May smiled. "Sometimes that's all any of us need. Someone to stand with." She patted his arm. "You're good for each other. Don't overthink it." Later, Jesse and Nora rode back to the ranch under a canopy of stars. The night was peaceful, danger past for now. "No regrets?" Jesse asked as they unsaddled the horses. "None," Nora said firmly, then softer. "I thought I'd lost everything when Thomas died. The ranch was all I had left, so I held on tight, maybe too tight." She turned to him. "But fighting for it with you, standing with the town, I remembered there are things worth more than land. People, community, love." Jesse pulled her close. "Wise woman." "I have my moments." She smiled up at him. "So what now? Jesse Cole, you've helped save the town, faced down the railroad, got the girl. What does a reformed drifter do next?" "Well," Jesse said thoughtfully, "there's still that barn to rebuild, and those mineral deposits to think about. Could take years to do it all proper." "Years," Nora agreed solemnly. "Maybe a lifetime." "Maybe so." He kissed her gently. "Good thing I've decided to stay." They walked hand in hand toward the house, leaving the horses to crop contentedly in the corral. Behind them, the agua seca gurgled softly, running free and clear. The land would bloom again with the next rains, and the ranch would prosper in time. But for now, it was enough to be home. The courthouse in Perdido had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was packed, people standing along the walls. More gathered outside, straining to hear through open windows. Jesse stood beside Nora, noting how she kept her chin high despite the weight of all those eyes. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. "This court will come to order. We're here to address the matter of Quinn versus the Central Pacific Railway Company, as well as charges against various parties for conspiracy, destruction of property, and attempted murder." Pike sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit unable to hide the fury in his eyes. He'd hired new lawyers from Denver, men in fine coats who looked at the simple folk of Perdido with barely concealed disdain. "Your Honor," Pike's lead attorney, a Mr. Thornberry, stood smoothly. "We motion for a change of venue. My client cannot receive a fair trial in this provincial setting." "Motion denied," Morrison said flatly. "The crimes were committed here. They'll be judged here. Proceed." Nora was called first to testify. Jesse watched with pride as she laid out her case: the harassment, the burned barn, the illegal dam. She spoke clearly, producing the translated land grant documents that proved her water rights. "These papers," she said, holding them up, "aren't just about my ranch. They're about the law meaning something, even out here, about people not being pushed off their land because someone richer wants it. Thornberry tried to shake her on cross-examination. Mrs. Quinn, isn't it true you were desperate, your husband dead? Debts mounting. Perhaps you saw Mr. Pike's generous offer as a threat because you wanted more money. Jessie's fists clenched, but Nora remained calm. Sir, I've got the receipts right here showing I was current on all debts. As for generous, she looked straight at Pike. $50 for 40 acres with water rights isn't generous. It's theft wearing a smile. A murmur ran through the crowd. May Horner nodded approvingly from her seat. Father Esteban testified next, authenticating the land grant documents and describing the church's role in preserving them. His quiet dignity made Thornberry's attempts to discredit him fall flat. Then came the surprise witness. The prosecution calls Samuel Hutchins. Jessie recognized him, Pike's thug, whose nose he'd broken that first night. But now Hutchins looked nervous, constantly glancing at Pike. Mr. Hutchins, the prosecutor began. You were employed by Mr. Pike. Yes, sir. Tell us about the night the Quinn barn burned. Hutchins squirmed. We were told to scare her, make problems so she'd sell cheap. Who gave those orders? Mr. Pike, through Dodd. Pike half rose from his seat. You lying? Order, Morrison banged his gavel. Continue, Mr. Hutchins. Pike said, make it look like an accident. We set the fire, but... He glanced at Nora. Wasn't supposed to spread so fast. Could have killed someone. And Sheriff Dodd. Pike owned him, paid him extra to look the other way. Arrest anyone who caused trouble. The revelations continued. Hutchins, given immunity for his testimony, laid out the whole scheme, the planned dam, the attempts to drive out Mexican landholders, even plans to dynamite the Agua Seca's source if necessary. Why testify now? The prosecutor asked. Hutchins looked at his bandaged hand. Dodd's dead. Pike tried to have us all killed to cover tracks. Man like that ain't worth protecting. Pike's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. When Jessie took the stand to describe the dam construction and the night assault, even their objections sounded desperate. Mr. Cole, Thornberry tried one last attack. You're a drifter, a hired gun. Why should this court believe you? Jessie met his gaze steadily. Because I've got nothing to gain from lying. I could have ridden on, left Mrs. Quinn to face this alone. But sometimes a man's got to stand for what's right, even if it costs him. Noble words from someone who shot men for money. I've done things I'm not proud of, Jessie admitted. But that's why I'm here, to do better. The court recessed for lunch in the plaza outside. Jessie and Nora were surrounded by well-wishers, but also by Pike's remaining men. Red Malloy stood across the square, his arm still bandaged, eyes promising violence. This ain't over, he called out. Court can say what it wants. Jessie started forward, but Nora caught his arm. No, we do this legally. Remember. When court reconvened, it was Pike's turn to testify. He was smooth. Jessie had to give him that. Every accusation had an explanation, every witness a motive for lying. Your Honor, Pike said earnestly, I'm a businessman trying to bring progress to this territory. Yes, I made offers for land fair offers. If locals chose to see conspiracy in simple commerce, well, that's their prejudice showing. But Morrison had seen too much. Mr. Pike, how do you explain the dam construction without permits? What dam that flood destroyed any evidence of what was or wasn't there? And Sheriff Dodd's death. A tragedy. Perhaps he had enemies from his law enforcement days. It went on for hours. Finally, Morrison called a recess until morning for closing arguments. As people filed out, Deputy Harlan, now acting sheriff, approached Jessie and Nora. Trouble coming, he said quietly. Malloy's been drinking and talking. Says he'll settle this tonight, court or no court. How many men? Jesse asked. Maybe 6, 8. I've got 2 deputies, but... Harlan looked embarrassed. They're scared. Can't say I blame them. Post them at the jail. Jesse said, keep Pike secure. We'll handle Malloy. Jesse, no, Nora protested. Let the law. The law's done what it can. Now we protect ourselves. That evening, the Blue Coyote was tense. May had her shotgun prominent behind the bar. Townspeople came and went, reporting Malloy's movements. He'd taken over the old livery stable with his men, fortifying it. They're waiting for dark, Miguel reported. I heard them talking. They plan to break Pike out, then come for you and Senora Nora. Jesse checked his guns, mind calculating. 8 men in a fortified position, not good odds. You're not going alone, Nora said firmly. This is my kind of fight. Our fight. She was already loading her rifle. Partners. Remember? Before Jesse could argue further, Father Esteban entered with several men merchants, ranchers, simple townsfolk. We've come to help, the priest said simply. This is our town too. More arrived. Soon, 30 armed citizens filled the saloon. Not gunfighters, but people defending their home. All right, Jesse said, recognizing the moment. Here's what we do. No heroes, no one-man charges. We surround the stable, give them one chance to surrender. They refuse. We make it too hot to stay. And if they come out shooting, someone asked. Then God help them. They moved through the dark streets. Jesse directing positions with hand signals. The stable was lit from within. Shadows moving past windows. Jesse could hear rough laughter, bottles clinking. Malloy, Jesse called out. You're surrounded. Throw out your guns and walk away. Silence. Then Malloy's laugh. That you, Cole, come to die legal-like. Look around. Red. Every gun in Perdido's aimed at that stable. Your move. A window shattered. Gunfire erupted. Jesse dove, rolling behind a water trough as bullets whined overhead. The townspeople opened up. A ragged but effective volley that sent Malloy's men scrambling. The roof! Nora shouted. Jesse saw them 2 men trying to get elevation. His rifle cracked twice, and they ducked back. The battle raged, muzzle flashes lighting the night like deadly fireflies. One of Malloy's men made a break for it, sprinting for the horses. May Horner stepped from cover. Shotgun booming, the man tumbled, clutching his leg. Out of the fight. Push in, Jesse commanded. Keep them pinned. The townspeople advanced, using cover, protecting each other. It wasn't pretty tactics, but it was effective. Malloy's men were hardened killers, but they weren't ready for a whole town's fury. The hay! Someone shouted. A lantern had fallen, igniting loose straw. Smoke began pouring from the stable. Everyone out, Jesse ordered. Let them come to us. They pulled back as flames took hold. Men stumbled from the stable, coughing, hands raised. Deputies moved in to disarm them. But not Malloy. The big gunman emerged last, pistol in hand, eyes finding Jesse through the smoke. Just you and me. Cole, he snarled. How it should be. Time slowed. Malloy's hand moved, fast as a striking snake. Jesse's hand swept down, muscle memory taking over. 2 shots cracked as one. Malloy staggered, looking surprised at the spreading red on his shirt. His gun fell from nerveless fingers. Damn, he said, almost conversationally, and collapsed. Jesse felt the burn across his ribs. Malloy's bullet had grazed him, tearing shirt and skin but missing vitals. Nora was there instantly, hands checking the wound. I'm okay, he assured her, though adrenaline made his hands shake. The fight was over. Malloy's surviving men were arrested. The stable left to burn safely away from other buildings. Pike, watching from his cell window, had seen his last hope disappear. Judge Morrison reconvened court at dawn. Unusual but necessary. The night's events had been added to evidence. When the verdicts came, no one was surprised. Pike guilty on all counts, sentenced to 20 years. His surviving men various sentences for conspiracy and assault. As for the water rights, Morrison concluded, all claims by the Central Pacific Railway Company are null and void. The rights remain with the Quinn Ranch as legally established by Spanish and Mexican grants, upheld by territorial law. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Jesse saw Nora crying, not from sadness, but relief. It was over. Outside, as Pike was led to the prison wagon, he stopped before them. Gone was the smooth businessman, only bitter defeat remained. "You've won nothing," he spat. "The railroad will keep coming. Progress can't be stopped." "Progress, yes," Nora said calmly. "But not theft, not bullying. The railroad's welcome in Perdido when it comes honest." Pike had no answer to that. Later, at the ranch, Jesse sat on the porch while Nora tended his wound. The sun was setting, painting the desert gold and crimson. "You know Pike was partially right," Jesse said. "The railroad will come eventually." "Let it come," Nora said. "We'll be ready. The whole town will—" She tied off the bandage. "We've proven something here, that people standing together are stronger than any company's money." "We have, haven't we?" Jesse caught her hand. "Thank you. For what?" "For reminding me what it's like to fight for something that matters, with people who matter." She smiled, that smile that had first caught his attention in the Blue Coyote. "Just returning the favor. You reminded me I didn't have to fight alone." Miguel came running up the path. "Senor Jesse, Senora, the town's having a fiesta. Everyone wants you there." They looked at each other and laughed. "Duty calls," Nora said. "Seems so." As they rode toward town, toward music and celebration and community, Jesse felt something he'd thought lost forever: belonging. The wanderer had found home not in a place, but in purpose. Not in solitude, but in standing with others. The stars were coming out, brilliant in the clear desert air. Somewhere a guitar played, and voices raised in an old Spanish song of victory and joy. Jesse reached over and took Nora's hand, their horses walking close together. "No regrets?" she asked, echoing his constant question. "Only one," Jesse said. Her face fell slightly. "What?" "That it took me so long to stop running." He squeezed her hand. "But I'm here now, and I'm staying." "Good," she said softly, "because this is just the beginning. There's the barn to rebuild, wells to dig, maybe even a school to help start." "A school?" "Miguel's not the only child who needs learning. And with the mineral rights, we could afford a teacher." Jesse listened to her plans, her dreams for Perdido and the ranch, and felt his own dreams awakening. Not the restless dreams of the trail, but dreams of building, growing, being part of something larger than himself. The fiesta lasted until dawn, the whole town celebrating not just victory but survival, not just justice but community. And at the center of it all, Jesse Cole, no longer just passing through, danced with Nora Quinn under the stars. Two souls who'd found their way home to each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight there was music and laughter and the woman he'd loved in his arms. For a reformed wanderer, it was more than enough. It was everything. The dust storm rose from the west like a brown wall eating the sky. Jesse felt it coming before he saw it, that electric tension in the air, the way the horses stamped nervously in the corral. He was checking the new barn's construction when Miguel came running. Senor Jesse Malloy's men, the ones who got away. They took Miguel from school. Jesse's blood went cold. "When?" "An hour ago. Teacher said men came, showed a paper saying his mother was sick. But Miguel's mother died 3 years past." Nora emerged from the house, rifle already in hand. She'd heard everything. "They're drawing us out." "Yeah." Jesse checked his Colt, mind racing. "Question is where?" Father Esteban arrived on a lathered horse. "Arroyo Seco. A shepherd saw riders heading that way. Jesse, there's more. Dodd's back." Dodd's dead. I saw him shot in Santa Fe. Wounded. Not dead. He's gathered the remnants, maybe 6, 7 men. They blame you for Pike's imprisonment, for ruining their scheme. Jesse cursed. Arroyo Seco was a maze of dry washes and blind canyons, perfect for ambush. And with a storm coming. "I'll get the sheriff," Nora said. "No time. That storm hits, it'll wipe out any trail." Jesse was already saddling Lark. Besides, Harlan's got 2 deputies. Not enough. Then we get help. "They've got Miguel." Jesse's voice was flat. "Every minute counts." Nora grabbed her own saddle. "Then we'd better ride." "Nora." "Don't," her green eyes flashed. "That boy's family to me. We go together or not at all." They rode hard toward Arroyo Seco, the storm wall growing behind them. The wind picked up, whipping sand that stung exposed skin. Jesse pulled his bandana up, squinting through the haze. The arroyo's entrance was narrow, walls of red rock rising on either side. Perfect killing ground. Jesse held up a hand, studying the terrain. "There," Nora pointed to scuff marks in the dust. "They went in. Could be watching the entrance. We go in blind, we're dead." "The old Comanche trail." Nora wheeled her horse. "Comes in from above. My father showed me once." They backtracked, finding the hidden path that switchbacked up the mesa. The horses struggled, hooves slipping on loose rock. Behind them, the storm was almost on them, a rolling mountain of dust and wind. At the rim, they could see down into the arroyo network. Jesse spotted them immediately. Riders clustered around a central wash, and there, small figure tied to a scraggly cottonwood, was Miguel. 7 men, Jesse counted. Dodd's the one in the black coat. The ex-sheriff looked older, meaner. A livid scar ran down his neck where the bullet had caught him. He was gesturing, giving orders. Men spread out, taking positions. "They're expecting us from below," Nora said. "Yeah, but that storm's going to hit in minutes." Jesse studied angles, distances. "When it does, visibility goes to nothing. We use that." "Jesse," Nora touched his arm. "If we get separated in that storm." "We won't." He met her eyes. "Partners stay together." The storm hit like a physical blow. One moment clear air, the next a howling brown nightmare. Sand-filled eyes, nose, mouth. The horses turned their backs to it, heads low. Jesse wrapped Nora's reins around his saddle horn, keeping them connected. They descended into the arroyo more by feel than sight. The wind screamed between the rock walls, creating a noise like 1,000 demons. Through the murk, Jesse caught glimpses of a man's shape, the cottonwood's twisted form. He drew his gun, then thought better. In this mess, shooting would be blind luck. A figure loomed from the dust. One of Dodd's men, as surprised as they were. Jesse kicked out, boot catching the man's jaw. He went down hard. Nora was already off her horse, using the man's own rope to tie him. They pressed forward on foot now, leading the horses. The cottonwood appeared like a ghost. Miguel was there, head down, covered in dust, alive. Jesse cut him free while Nora watched their backs. The boy fell into Jesse's arms, coughing. "I knew you'd come," Miguel gasped. "Always. Son, can you ride?" "See?" A shot cracked, audible even over the wind. Rock chips sprayed from beside Jesse's head. More shots, muzzle flashes barely visible in the brown twilight. "Move!" Jesse lifted Miguel onto Lark, then fired back at the flashes. Nora's rifle spoke beside him, steady and calm. They retreated, using the horses as shields, but Dodd's men knew the arroyo. Shapes appeared from side washes, cutting off escape routes. "This way," Miguel pointed to a narrow cleft. "It leads up." They squeezed through, horses protesting. Behind them, shouts and curses. The passage was tight, barely wide enough for the horses, but it climbed, switching back toward the rim. Halfway up, Jesse looked back, through a gap in the dust. He saw Dodd following, face twisted with hate. Their eyes met across the distance. Dodd raised his gun. Jesse shoved Nora down as the bullet whined overhead. He fired back, seeing Dodd duck. Then the storm closed again, brown curtain falling. They reached the rim, gasping. The storm was passing, its eastern edge already visible. Soon, visibility would return and they'd be exposed on the mesa top. "Ride for town," Jesse ordered. "I'll hold them." "No," Nora and Miguel said together. "That's an order." "I don't take your orders. Jesse Cole." Nora dismounted, checking her rifle. "We've finished this together." The dust was thinning. Below, Dodd's men were emerging from the arroyo, looking up, 6 of them, spreading out. Jesse made a quick choice. "Miguel, ride hard for town. Bring help." "But go." The boy spurred away as the first shots came from below. Jesse and Nora took cover behind a rock outcrop. Not much protection, but it would have to do. "Should have listened to me," Jesse said, firing at a climbing figure. "Should have married someone obedient," Nora replied, her shot dropping a man clutching his shoulder. "Despite everything," Jesse smiled. "Wouldn't have you any other way?" The fight was desperate. Dodd's men had numbers and were working around their flanks. Jesse was down to his last cylinder. Nora counting bullets. "Jesse!" she pointed. Dodd had circled wide, coming from their blind side. Too late to swing around. Dodd stepped into view, gun aimed at Nora. "Drop them now." They had no choice. Weapons fell. "Should have stayed gone. Cole," Dodd said, approaching. "Had to come back. Play hero. Now the woman dies for it." "Your fight's with me," Jesse said, stepping partially in front of Nora. "No, you cost me everything. Badge, money, reputation. So you'll lose everything." Dodd's gun shifted to Nora, starting with her. Time slowed. Jesse saw Dodd's finger tighten, saw Nora's eyes, defiant to the end, felt his own hand drop to the hideout gun in his boot too slow, too late. The shot was impossibly loud. Dodd staggered, nodded surprised. Behind him, Miguel sat on a borrowed horse, smoking rifle in small hands. The boy had circled back instead of running for help. Jesse didn't waste the chance. The hideout gun came up, barked once. Dodd spun and fell, gun tumbling from his hand. "Drop them, all of you!" This time the shout came from Deputy Harlan, riding hard with a dozen townsmen. "It's over." Dodd's remaining men, seeing the odds, threw down their weapons. The fight was done. Jesse knelt by Dodd. The ex-sheriff was gut-shot, face gray with pain and coming death. "Should have killed you that first night," Dodd gasped. "Maybe, but you didn't, and now it's finished." Pike had the right idea. Progress, can't fight it forever. "Not fighting progress," Jesse said quietly. "Just making sure it comes honest." Dodd's eyes went distant, seeing something beyond the mesa. Tell my wife." But there was nothing left to tell. The man who'd sold his badge for railroad money died looking at the sky he'd betrayed. They rode back to Perdido in somber procession. The storm had passed completely, leaving the air crystal clear. Every rock and plant stood out sharp, washed clean. At the ranch, May Horner and Father Esteban waited with half the town. Word had spread. When they saw Miguel safe, a cheer went up. "You saved us," Jesse told the boy. "That was brave, coming back." Miguel stood straighter. "You taught me, Senor, partners don't abandon each other." Later, as the sun set, Jesse and Nora sat on their porch. His arm was around her head on his shoulder. The excitement was done, leaving only exhaustion and relief. "I thought I'd lost you today," Jesse said quietly. When Dodd had that gun on you. But you didn't. She looked up at him. We didn't lose each other. That's what matters. Miguel could have been killed. You could have... Stop. She placed a finger on his lips. We all made choices. Miguel chose to come back. I chose to stand with you. You chose to face them instead of running. Good choices, all. Still, the danger. We'll always be there. This is the frontier, Jesse. But we face it together. She smiled. Besides, someone needs to keep you from doing all the heroics yourself. He pulled her closer. Nora Quinn, you are the stubbornest woman in the territory. Good thing you love stubborn women. Good thing indeed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge. The agua seca gurgled nearby, full from the recent rains. Somewhere in the house, Miguel was regaling May with his version of events, probably growing more dramatic with each telling. What Dodd said, Nora murmured, about progress. He wasn't entirely wrong. No, change is coming. Railroad, telegraph, civilization. Can't stop it. Don't want to stop it. Just want to make sure places like Perdido don't get trampled in the rush. Jesse nodded. We'll need to be ready, strong, united. We are. She gestured toward town, where lights were coming on. Look what we've built. A community that stands together. That's stronger than any railroad. A coyote called in the distance, answered by another, the eternal song of the desert, unchanged by human ambitions. Tomorrow there would be statements to give, Dodd's men to process, normal life to resume. The barn still needed finishing, wells to dig, plans to make. But tonight, Jesse Cole sat with the woman he loved, on land they'd fought to protect, in a community they'd helped save. The wanderer had become a builder. The loner had found family. Thank you, Nora said suddenly. For what? For staying? That morning you walked up to the ranch instead of riding out? Everything changed. For both of us. Jesse agreed. Best wrong turn I ever made. She laughed, the sound bright in the desert air. Come on, hero. May left supper, and I bet Miguel's eaten half already. They went inside together, leaving the vast desert night to its ancient peace. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. But here, now, they were home. And that was worth any fight. The morning sun painted Perdido's Main Street gold as Jesse helped raise the frame of the new schoolhouse. 6 months had passed since the showdown at Arroyo Seco, and the town was transforming. Where once fear had ruled, now hope was building literally, board by board. Little more to the left, Nora called from below, directing the placement. She wore her work clothes, hair tied back, beautiful in her element as she organized the construction. The mineral rights had proven valuable, not a fortune, but enough to fund projects like this. Jesse hammered another beam into place, sweat already beading despite the early hour. Below, half the town had turned out to help. May Horner directed the women preparing lunch. Father Esteban blessed the cornerstone, and Miguel ran messages between work crews with the energy only a 12-year-old could maintain. Never thought I'd see the day, said Tom Brennan, the blacksmith, working beside Jesse. Perdido with its own school. Times are changing, Jesse replied. Thanks to folks like you and Mrs. Quinn. Brennan paused. Speaking of which, when are you going to make an honest woman of her? Jesse missed the nail, nearly catching his thumb. We're taking things proper. Brennan chuckled. Son, you've been taking things proper for 6 months. Half the town's got bets on when you'll propose. Before Jesse could respond, a shout went up. Riders approaching, a lot of them. Jesse's hand went instinctively to where his gun should be, then remembered he'd left it off for the barn raising. Old habits. But these weren't threats. It was a delegation from the railroad, led by a thin man in spectacles who looked profoundly uncomfortable on horseback. Mr. Pemberton. Nora greeted him. climbing down from supervising. "You're early. Eager to conclude our business. Mrs. Quinn." Pemberton dismounted gratefully. "Is there somewhere we could talk?" They convened in the Blue Coyote, now serving as unofficial town hall when needed. Jessie stood behind Nora's chair as she spread the contracts on the table. The railroad still needed water rights, but this time they'd come honest. "Fair market price," Pemberton said. "Plus, the railroad commits to stopping in Perdido, building a proper station. Your town becomes a regular stop, not just a water depot. And the employment guarantees," Nora pressed. "As discussed, local hiring preference, fair wages. The railroads learned from previous mistakes." Jessie had to admire how Nora negotiated. She'd studied every angle, consulted lawyers in Santa Fe, made sure Perdido got its due. When the contracts were signed, the town had secured its future without selling its soul. "Pleasure doing business," Pemberton said, looking relieved. "Mr. Pike's methods were unfortunate. The company's committed to better practices going forward." After they left, the celebration was subdued but genuine. The railroad would bring change, but on Perdido's terms. "You did it," Jessie told Nora as they walked back to the schoolhouse. "We did it," she corrected. "The whole town." Work resumed with renewed energy. By late afternoon, the school's frame was complete. People stood back, admiring their handiwork. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was theirs. "I've been thinking," Nora said as they gathered tools, "about what Brennan said earlier." Jessie froze. "You heard that?" "Sound carries." She didn't look at him, focusing on cleaning a hammer. "He's not wrong. We've been dancing around this for months." "Nora, I'm not pushing, just observing." Now she did look at him, green eyes serious. "What are you afraid of?" "Jessie." He was quiet for a long moment. Around them, townspeople packed up, calling cheerful good nights. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting everything amber. "I'm not afraid," he said finally. You deserve better than some reformed saddle tramp with blood on his hands." "Stop!" Her voice was firm. "You're not that man anymore. Haven't been since you chose to stay." "The past doesn't just disappear." "No, but it doesn't define the future either." She stepped closer. "Jessie Cole, you've helped save this town. You've been a father to Miguel when he needed one. You've stood by me through everything. What more do you need to prove?" He looked at her, really looked, saw not just the woman he'd fallen for, but his partner in every sense, the one who'd touched his chest and told him to stay, who'd changed his whole world with 2 words. "Nothing," he admitted. "I don't need to prove anything. I just need to ask the right question." Her breath caught. "Jessie!" He dropped to one knee right there in the dusty street, taking her hand. "Nora Quinn, you gave me a reason to stop running. You showed me what it means to build instead of destroy. Will you? Yes." He blinked. "I haven't finished asking." "Then hurry up, because the answer's still yes." "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said again, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, you wonderful, stubborn man." He stood and kissed her as whoops and cheers erupted around them. Seemed half the town had lingered to watch. May Horner was already calling out wedding plans. Father Esteban beaming, Miguel jumping up and down with joy. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, the whole town turning out. Nora wore her mother's dress, altered to fit, looking radiant in the simple white cotton. Jessie had bought his first new suit, feeling strange, but right in its formality. "Nervous?" Deputy Harlan asked. "Standing as best man?" "No," Jessie said honestly. "Never been more sure of anything." Father Esteban performed the ceremony in the little church, speaking of love not as escape from hardship, but as strength to face it together. When Jessie kissed his bride, the cheers could probably be heard in Santa Fe. The reception filled the entire main street. Tables groaned under food, musicians played, and dancing went on until stars filled the sky. Jesse watched Nora dance with Miguel, teaching him the steps, and felt his heart so full it might burst. "Happy?" May asked, joining him. "More than I have words for." "Good. You both deserve it." She paused. "So what now, going to settle into quiet married life?" Jesse laughed, in perdido quiet, as if to prove his point. A commotion started near the church. A stranger had ridden in a young woman, dusty and exhausted, clutching a baby. "Please," she gasped. "They're after us. My husband, he stood up to the mine owners in Silver City. They killed him, said they'd take our son, put him in an orphanage, make sure he never causes trouble like his father." The crowd murmured angrily. Nora pushed through, still in her wedding dress. "You're safe now. No one's taking your child." "Ma'am, I don't want to bring trouble." "Trouble?" Jesse stepped forward. "Lady, this town's got experience with bullies thinking they can push folks around. Sheriff Harlan, might be we need to send a message to Silver City about what Perdido thinks of their tactics." "Already planning on it," Harlan said grimly. "They got the woman Sarah Morrison, no relation to the judge settled at May's. Her story came out in pieces. Her husband had tried to organize miners for better conditions. The mine owners had him killed, called it an accident, then came for his family to protect the child. We'll protect them," Nora said firmly. "And we'll make sure Silver City knows the cost of pursuing them here." It took another month of legal wrangling and a few tense confrontations. But Sarah and her son found safety in Perdido. She became the new schoolteacher, passionate about education after what ignorance had cost her husband. Fall came, then winter, mild by territorial standards but still requiring preparation. The ranch prospered, the new wells Jesse had dug providing ample water. The barn stood proud and strong, filled with good hay. The goat herd had doubled, and they'd added some cattle. One evening, as snow dusted the mountains, Jesse and Nora sat by their fire. She was knitting badly, but determinedly. He was working on the ranch books, still amazed at being responsible for such things. "Jesse," she said quietly, "I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him look up. She was smiling, nervous and radiant at once. "We're going to have a baby." The ledger slipped from his hands. We're... Come spring, I saw Doc Martinez today." She bit her lip. "Are you happy?" Was he happy? Jesse crossed to her, knelt beside her chair, placed his hand wonderingly on her still flat stomach. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. They held each other, laughing and crying at once. A child, a future stretching beyond anything Jesse had imagined that day he'd ridden into Perdido, just passing through. Spring arrived with unusual rains, turning the desert briefly green. The railroad reached Perdido, the first train pulling into cheers and wonder. Change had come, but the town had shaped it rather than being shaped by it. Sarah Morrison's school thrived, children learning to read and write and question. The water compact held, ranchers and railroad coexisting. Former enemies became neighbors, even some of Pike's men. Those who'd been desperate rather than cruel found second chances in Perdido's growing prosperity. And on a perfect April morning, as wildflowers painted the hills, Catherine Maria Cole was born. Jesse held his daughter for the first time, this tiny, perfect life, and understood completely why some things were worth fighting for, worth staying for. "She's beautiful," Nora murmured, exhausted but glowing. "Like her mother." Jesse touched the baby's impossibly small hand, watched tiny fingers curl around his. "Hello, little one. Welcome to Perdido." Through the window, he could see the town, his town now, truly where he'd learned to stop running, to build instead of drift, to love instead of fear. The place where a widow's touch had changed everything. "No regrets?" Nora asked softly, echoing their old refrain. Jesse looked at his wife, his daughter, his whole world contained in this simple room. Through the walls, he could hear the life of Perdido Miguel helping at the store, May serving customers, Father Esteban's bells calling evening prayer. The railroad whistle sounded in the distance, but it was just another part of the town's rhythm now. Not a threat, but a promise. "Not one," he said, and meant it to his bones. "Not a single one." Outside, the Agua Seca flowed steady and strong. Its waters shared fairly among all who needed them. The cottonwoods Nora had planted along its banks were growing tall, their leaves whispering secrets to the desert wind. And in the Quinn Now Coal Ranch House, a family that had found each other against all odds settled in for their first night as three. Jesse Cole had started as a man just passing through, but sometimes, if you're very lucky, passing through becomes staying, becomes belonging, becomes home. And in Perdido, where the desert meets the mountains and water means life, where courage built community and love conquered fear. Jesse had found all three. The drifter's journey was over. The real life, messy, challenging, wonderful, had just begun. As stars emerged in the vast southwestern sky, Jesse held his family close and gave thanks for the day he'd stopped to water his horse in a dusty town, for a strong woman who'd seen past his shadows, and for two words that changed everything: "You stay." He had stayed, and in staying, had found more than he'd ever dreamed possible. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale. Please share your location in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Jesse and Nora's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Hit that like button. And don't forget to click the hype button to help more listeners discover this video. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more frontier adventures with you. Until next time, partners.